Awesome. So we are recording now. Everyone, welcome to this webinar. I am Emmanuel Ndifer from UpKey, and this webinar is in partnership with Morgan State University. The recording will be live for later viewing. So if you're a student and you're not able to make it to this webinar, no worries. A lot of information is going to be given and insights from experts like Sabrina and Kurt will be unleashed upon you. And I'm hoping that you're going to use that and implement all of the knowledge that we're going to share with you today and use it to navigate the uncharted waters that we currently are in right now. If you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to your career services. And for more information about the speakers, Sabrina, myself, and Kurt, make sure you connect with us on LinkedIn. That is a place where we live, breathe, and exist as professionals. So make sure you reach out to us if you have any questions after this. I'm sure that we will be willing to answer any questions. So about myself from UpKey, I manage marketing and growth. We are a career development education tech company, and the focus for UpKey is to really provide resources to universities and non-for-profits and other organizations to assist students with their career development journey. We work with Morgan State University and a bunch of other universities across the nation. So you should definitely check us out and check out the services that we provide. And I'm sure you're going to find them valuable. We have Kurt and Sabrina today. I would like to do an intro, but because they are here, I think they'll be better placed to talk about themselves than I can ever do. And I think it'll be nice for me to shut up so that they can have the audience too. So Sabrina, why don't you take it?
I guess first off, you can hear me, no problem?
Yes, I can hear you, no problem.
Yeah, good, because I have my old school mic. Yeah, I graduated in 2006 as an engineering student at a University of British Columbia here in Vancouver, Canada. So I was a practicing engineer for 8 years in the corporate world before I moved into business development and project management for Fortune 500 companies. So I'm now currently a project manager working in the engineering construction industry. Last summer, I decided that I would do a bit of a side hustle and decided to launch Work Lessons 101 while I was on maternity leave. And that company focuses very similar to UpKey, kind of targeting aspiring professionals and preparing them for their career, specializing in the corporate environment. So I actually wrote a book, Work Lessons 101, What They Don't Teach in School, which has 101 critical work lessons that I think aspiring candidates need essentially to climb the corporate ladder, understand where they want to focus and how to pick companies, company cultures that can fit their skills and that can also create the environment that they'll need to excel in as they move up throughout their career. It's primarily targeted for that first decade of your career so you can really lay that foundation and move forward.
Should I go?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. My name's Kurt Mercadante. I'm a speaker, trainer, author. I've built 3 profitable businesses. Long story short, I shut down a 7-figure PR and ad agency about 3 years ago because I was unfulfilled, suffered from fear, anxiety, was losing my wife, was losing my kids, was losing my health. And what I realized was that all the things I had been taught since growing up, that everything I did in school, everything was geared toward just getting a job, was BS. And what I realized was, and what I'd like to share with you all, is that the purpose of education isn't simply to get a job. And I know that is very hard to understand, but building a fulfilling life is the most important thing. And when I was in my 20s, I would have told someone like me, you're stupid, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about. But I work with a lot of 40 and 45-year-olds who spent 25, 30 years pursuing that line, bouncing around like a pinball. So what I've dedicated my life to do is helping people live lives of freedom and fulfillment. I published a book last year called 5 Pillars of the Freedom Lifestyle, launched something called the Freedom Media Network, which helps people tell their stories and provides information that spurs critical thinking that helps you to live a life of freedom, abundance, prosperity. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And I know you have limited time with us, so I'll try to get as much as I can from you for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And then Sabrina and myself will continue with the webinar. So just to go back to the whole theme of the webinar today, the impact of COVID-19 for college graduates and how to overcome related challenges. I want to talk a little bit about what we are doing at UpKey to try and help students and candidates within this crisis. So about a couple of months ago, or a month or two ago, we started receiving emails from students that are part of our network, and they were frustrated about the fact that companies were slow in going forward with their scheduled interviews. But most importantly, a couple of weeks later, we started receiving dozens of emails from candidates talking about how they have been displaced, their summer internships has been canceled, so they didn't know what to do. And in the light of things, after talking to a lot of companies, we realized that this was something we already forecasted was going to be even more prominent in terms of how many students got displaced from their dreams and their jobs and their hopes. So we decided to form a coalition of leading companies and universities to create this virtual internship program that is going to focus on really real world leadership skills that an entry or a first kind of job opportunity will present for a student to build on their hard and soft skills, and more so work towards an experiential learning environment where students would work on real world projects from companies and really simulate the same environment that they are going to be missing. So if you're a student here, I send a poll out. I know a couple of you are still looking for internship and some of you lost some internships. So go to upkey.com/internship and apply. We already have about 4,000 applications. So make sure you get there. It's going to be closed May 8th and hopefully you get in the program. So Kurt, I'll start with you. One of the things that I have been looking at is the economic impact on this whole COVID-19, not just with industries or with different sectors, but how this is going to really affect students. I think we miss out the conversation and talking about how students are really going to be affected by COVID-19. I go on LinkedIn and there's a lot of very good information out there, but I don't really see a lot of information, maybe just because of my exposure in terms of how this is going to affect students. The first question, Kurt, is what differences are you seeing with what we are going into? Because I believe we are going into a recession versus the last recession.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a good possibility, quite honestly, that we're not just going into a recession. We could be going into a depression. Ray Dalio, who wrote the book Principles, said that this week we could be facing a new world order. I think the most important thing is, one thing that I look at that actually provides me some solace. We went from a situation where we were at almost 100% employment for years. I mean, 5% unemployment. And we had a situation where people couldn't get jobs because people weren't hiring or actually, sorry, people couldn't get jobs. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. Employers couldn't find people to fill the jobs that they had. We had here in Charleston, South Carolina, there were so many jobs, they couldn't find people to find them. In the matter of a month, we flipped that around, right? And so I actually find solace in the fact that we're all in the same boat, whether you're a student or whether you're an employee or whether you're an employer or whether you're an entrepreneur. This is affecting all of us equally, which means, quite honestly, that if you are a student or a recent graduate looking for a job, you're in the same boat as an entrepreneur who may have just lost all their clients. You're in the same boat as someone who's 45 looking for a job, which means that you need to step back and yield. I know many of you you're just graduating, you took philosophy classes, right? I don't know if you studied the Tao Te Ching, Stoicism, but one of the key tenets is step back, yield. Stop getting so in the weeds that you lose sight of the entire forest and you're just chopping down trees and like, I got to get a job. I've sent out 100 resumes. It's not working. What's going on? Step back a little bit. Look at what everyone else is doing and then look at the opportunities around you. Because if you are a recent graduate and looking for a job, or you're 50 years old and looking for a job, you are now in sales. Whether you like it or not, whether you like the word sales or not, you're in sales, which means you have to brand yourself. I recently interviewed someone named Isaac Morehouse. He's actually a good friend. He founded a startup called Praxis, which is apprenticeships. And now he's moved on to something called Crash, which helps people brand themselves to find new jobs. And the reason he started this, and the reason you're doing what you're doing, is that he got sick of cookie cutter approaches of people approaching him and saying, I sent out 100 resumes, it's not working. And the fact of the matter is that wasn't working in a good economy. It's not going to work in a bad economy. Right now, and I love what you said in terms of, and what UpKey is doing in terms of helping people gain real world experience. Back in the 90s, when I was in college, way back when, the reason that I was able to move and create success in my life went back to the internships, paid and yes, unpaid. I know that's a dirty word right now. Unpaid internships back in the 90s. Every summer, I spent my summer doing internships. And I remember my wife's brother, I got him an interview at J. Walter Thompson, one of the top ad agencies in the world. He didn't even take the interview because he said he would rather go and work at the pool that summer. Well, he just turned 40 and he's been doing a job doing cold call sales. He hates it. He's hated it for decades. I can trace it back to the internships and his lack of getting internships. So that real world experience is going to be so important. It was important in the 90s. It's more important now to differentiate yourself because, listen, whatever you have on your piece of paper, that is either your resume or your degree, I got news for you. The other 10, 15, 20 applicants made their resumes look equally good. So how are you going to differentiate yourself? How are you going to brand yourself? One, it starts with the experience, which is the reason we're doing this today. Getting that real world experience to differentiate yourself, because we already see people like Elon Musk, Apple, Google saying they're actually preferring people without a degree because they want that real world experience. So that's super important. Two is, how can you brand yourself beyond, I'm just going to send a resume. I'm going to send 20 resumes out, 30 resumes out, 40 resumes out, 50 resumes out, and say it's working or not working. What can you do to get creative? Video sales letters. Go follow. If you really want to see how to do it, don't follow a lot of people that tell you how to do resumes and career coaches. Follow people like Grant Cardone. Go follow Gary Vee. Follow some of the top sales experts, Mark Hunter, Mike Weinberg. Go follow the folks who talk about creating a customer persona. So find those 10 employers you really, really want to work on. Don't just select 100 and randomly send stuff out to them. Select 10, your customer persona. Just like me, when I'm going to go out and get a client or a customer, I select my customer persona. Develop your impact story, which is, here's my experience. Here's really what I want to do. And realize that that customer, the person you want a job from, they don't care about your resume. They don't care about the classes you took. They don't care about all that stuff. What they care about is, what's in it for me? In the end, that's what any client, any customer wants to know, and any person going to hire you. What can you do for me? When I hire you, are you going to make my life easier? Figure out a way to tell that impact story to those 10 people. Videos. Heck, start a podcast right now. Do a webinar. Get an internship. Show that real world experience to differentiate yourself from every single person. We were talking about my logo before with my beard. Create a logo. Create something that differentiates yourself from the cookie cutter approach to finding jobs. It's sales 101, it's branding 101. There's no reason that a job search has to be the cookie cutter job search that everyone's done for 20 years, because right now in this environment, differentiating yourself, branding yourself, selling yourself, it's great. It's important by the way, I love your mug, Sabrina. It's super important in a great economy. It's even more important now in a downturn.
Thank you so much. I think there's a lot of information that we have to unpack. Sabrina, what do you have to add to that?
So I think Kurt hit one really important point. Well, he hit a lot of important points. The one that I want to emphasize is differentiation. So I worked, when I was an entry-level engineer, I actually did primarily most of the interviews for my boss because he hated them. He was just a very introverted person. So he delegated that to me. So I read many, many resumes of new grads. And then when I moved into business development, I put teams together to sell billion-dollar projects. So I will tell you what most recruiters, HR people look for in resumes. So you're a new grad, you probably have limited experience. very few of you, I've talked to many that say they have no experience. I don't believe that. I think, just like Kurt said, you need to learn how to sell what the employer is looking for, because many of you have experience, maybe not in the traditional sense. It could be through volunteer, it could be just hobbies too, right? So for example, so create differentiation. Your resume will probably be about a page, 2 pages as a new grad. And if you are applying through automated systems, you have to make sure your resume passes the ATS, which is the applicant tracking system. The corporate world where I work primarily uses that. What it is, after this, just Google ATS resume template. Many resumes from new grads are super fancy. They got images, columns, none of that stuff's going to pass the ATS software. So be mindful of that. Step 1. You're going to get a job, somebody needs to read your resume, and 75% of resumes that get sent to corporations aren't read. So that's step 1. Step 2, if it's getting read, you need to differentiate yourself. How do you differentiate yourself? I've read over 1,000 resumes, and only 5% of the resumes that I've read do this. So be that 5%. Highlight your accomplishments, your credentials, and the values you bring. That means you need to quantify what you brought to your previous positions and roles. It's great that you had responsibilities and duties. That doesn't guarantee your job. Everybody that's applying for a position has those. So what I mean by differentiation and how to quantify it so I can get my head around the value that you brought to the role is something like how you solve the problem. So I work for a conservative corporation that doesn't use a lot of software. So one of the differentiations that I would look for a new grad is someone that brought like a filing system. So the old filing system took 3 days to file our clients' reports. I noticed this. I ended up implementing such and such software that turned that 3 days into 3 hours. Quantified it, immediate the value. Have that trickle through your resume in every role. A couple little accomplishments here, there. Cater your cover letters to the employer. Those are always written to cater to the position, and your resume also needs to be tweaked and catered to the position and to complement the resume. So the cover letter is kind of the hook to get them to read the resume. Always send a cover letter regardless if they request one or not. Because it gives you an extra chance to sell yourself. So the biggest thing is selling yourself, differentiate yourself. And then if you do get the interview, obviously preparing exceptionally thoroughly for it. Do not just randomly send your resume into 100 things. It's not about necessarily just getting the job, because if you get the job doesn't mean you'll get the skills. You might have actually missed the opportunity that you're meant for. So read those ads thoroughly from companies, target your cover letter and resume, and differentiate yourself through that. And that kind of the cherry on the top, what Kurt also mentioned, is networking, basically. So you got to create that brand and make that connection. So I got my first interview in the corporate world through a network contact. He was actually my professor at school. There was no ad. Well, the ad was there. I did not apply through the ad. I had my resume personally handed to my future boss. That is how you kind of work around the system too, is to make a connection and impress the right people. So you have to, if you're going to say, I don't know much about Google. It's not my area of expertise, but if you're going to target a certain industry and a certain company, go on LinkedIn and start to find out who's who. Do they have webinars, free webinars you can sign up? Can you get your email on an email distribution list that you can hear about inside information, and try to make that real life practical connection with that person that could help you maybe skip a few steps to differentiate yourself from your competition.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think there's a lot to unpack with what you both said, and I think we're going to go into some of the details later. Craig, I know you have to go, and we have a question here that said, what are your thoughts on attending graduate school to write this out and delay the job search? I have an opinion about this question, but I want to get yours first, Kurt, because I know you have to leave soon.
Yeah, I would just ask why. You know, why are you going to attend graduate school? Just to hide it out and to ride this out? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. This could be like this for 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years. No one knows at this point. But what is your why? You know, again, I go back to, why are we educated? Why do we go to school? Why did you go to college? If it's just to get a job, I think you got to step back a little bit, yield a little bit, look at what you really want to do. You know, I start my workshops and my trainings with a simple question: who are you? And so many people, they could be 30, they could be 60, stand up and they say, hi, I'm Jim, I'm Jane, and I'm chief of marketing, I'm VP of sales. I say, whoa, wait. When you came out of the womb, did you have a name tag on that said, I'm Jim, I'm Jane, I'm chief of sales or VP of marketing? No, so you got to determine who you are and what you want to do. So does going to graduate school get you there? And are you just delaying? Are you going to graduate school simply to spend more money, by the way, either your money, someone else's money, because someone's always paying for it, to go and hide out for a couple years? Or are you doing it intentionally, not just to hide out, but is it going and getting you, is it an outcome toward the vision that you want to achieve in your life? If no, then why would you do that? Because you got to realize, whether it's your money you're spending, your parents' money you're spending, the taxpayers' money you're spending, whoever it is, whatever money you're spending, there is a cost to that, but there's also a cost of 2 years not getting any income. 2 years, I mean, going back to exactly what Sabrina and I just said, are you building real world experience that's going to differentiate yourself? And if we're in a world where experience, what can you do for me right now? I mentioned Google, Elon Musk, Apple, people looking for people they don't have to relearn, retrain right then and there. Is graduate school going to differentiate yourself? You know, I have my strong opinions about not going to graduate school if it's not going to get you where you want to go. I know a lot of people who kind of hit out and got degree after degree after degree after degree, and 8 years into it, didn't earn any income, and at the end of 8 years, still didn't know what they wanted to do. There are less expensive ways, resource-wise, time-wise, money-wise, to differentiate yourself, to kind of find yourself, than spending, depends on the school, right? Tens of thousands of dollars on graduate school, but that's my opinion.
Sabrina?
So this is my second recession in my career. So I can actually sympathize very much in this question, because in 2008, when the economy collapsed, my backup plan, if I was laid off from my job, was to go get a master's degree. I'm an engineer, and at the time of 2008, when I had to deal with this, I wanted to be an engineer. So long-term goals when you're 20 years old is, you know, some have it. I would say the majority of new grads don't have a really focused, refined long-term goal, and that's absolutely okay. Your short-term goals feed your long-term goals. Always remember that. But you should kind of know what you want to do within the next 1 to 5 years-ish. So as an engineer, a graduate degree can benefit you depending on the industry you're going to enter, especially if you want to eventually pursue your PhD. Subject matter experts are huge in my field. So that's the first question, is at least with what you know what you want to do with your life and your career at this point, will it benefit you? If I did my master's, it was going to be paid for. I was going to make a whopping $19,000 a year, but that's better than no money. So it is a potential opportunity if it's going to align, you're not going further into debt. I'm with Kurt on this. There is no glory going thousands and thousands of dollars into debt when you're not sure. There are other ways to learn that, online. You might not get accredited for it, but at least you can get a tiny bit of experience and a little bit of an idea if you like it. If you're thinking of doing a generic master's like an MBA, because you actually truly want to pursue business, there are opportunities. I would start to try to look at differentiation from an MBA, because I deal with so many MBAs. I don't actually think it is a differentiation anymore. Anybody with like 5 to 10 years of business experience would impress me more than someone with just an MBA. So if you're thinking going business, instead of maybe potentially doing an MBA, think about maybe doing a master's of economics, something that's a little bit different, more specific, into a very specific thing. So your graduate degree kind of gives you that experience and that credential at the same time. And then also start to think about doing a side business. And this is how really impresses me. So I met a 22-year-old about 3 months ago, and he runs a podcast, he runs a business, he has 4 different websites, and he has a degree. So he has like all these little check marks plus all this extra stuff. So think kind of over the next year, especially if you feel like you're not going to be able to get a position, is how can I brand myself? So if you want to go into marketing, you should have a website. You should have a logo for your company that you yourself designed. You should be in digital marketing. You should have an Instagram account with your own graphics and own infographics that you designed. And then you can also, to build experience and skills, pick other companies and kind of redesign it. Like, obviously you might not get paid for that, but you're showing an employer or someone like me that you're keen and you're driven. I want to know people are driven, and you just saying you're driven on your resume isn't proof. So if you have a really professional LinkedIn profile, and then that links to your website. And if you don't know how to do that, just go visit my LinkedIn profile, Sabrina Woodworth, and you'll see right away my website at the top of my profile, my executive summary or my summary, and then my breakdown of my experience. Have a professional photo, because I immediately toss people that don't. No baseball caps, no sunglasses, no selfies. Just on the top of the does not impress me, and won't impress any recruiter or HR person. It means, especially if you're going into something like marketing where attention to detail is critical, that kind of weeds you out by that you don't have attention to detail, because I know everything's about being authentic nowadays, and I totally, absolutely 100% that you need to be true to yourself and be authentic, but you need to curb your personality in certain work environments. In the professional environment, when people don't know you and don't know your wonderful personality, people do judge a book by its cover. And so don't be naive and just kind of give that image, but also go away and create yourself unique. If you don't want to put your resume on LinkedIn, still have a professional LinkedIn profile, but throw it back to your website and have your professional brand and website there. You want to be an entrepreneur or you want to go into business, then start your own business. If you can't get a experience with it, when I mean start your own business, it doesn't have to be anything like spectacular. We're in the middle of COVID right now. My husband has an autoimmune disorder. I no longer go to the grocery store because I can't even risk myself getting sick to give it to him right now. So I rely heavily on delivery. So to get a spot for delivery is really hard right now. And think of all the senior citizens out there. So start a little quick company online. I just, shopping cart. Okay. Charge a $25, $20 blank fee and go deliver it. And then within 3 months, you could have 200 clients. You could have, plus all the community and how you've helped. You could really sell that little side business on a resume and quantify. Oh, made $4,000 this month doing, or maybe that's excessive, $2,000 this month doing this, 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 and this. And you can start it. So it doesn't have to be something crazy like I developed an app software. It doesn't have to be that complex. Anyone can start a delivery company online with minimal costs, dog walking. It does not have to be anything crazy.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, you guys touched on a lot of the points that I was going to touch on. Yeah, but the one takeaway from me with everything would be, number one, you have to take a step back and ask yourself why. And, you have to feel out the other things that the two panelists just mentioned. So Kurt has left. He had a prior appointment. So thanks for joining us, Kurt. We do have a question from Jessica. She says, I agree. Do you think that being a jack of all trades is something better to see with a candidate? Let's see. This question is pretty tricky because when I do hire people, I look at what else they bring to the table, especially when you are an entry-level candidate. One of the things that I'm looking for is grit and hunger and, the drive to go above and beyond to do things that are not within a confinement. So being a jack of all trade, it depends what stage you are you in your career? Are you an early professional? And if you are an early professional and I see on your resume, maybe you've done like some delivery or you've done some waiting and, you've been a boss boy, I don't mind that at all, because I know for a fact that when you're going into an internship or you're going to an entry-level job, you're going to be trained. I'm not expecting you to come solve my high-level problems. I'm expecting you to learn and to adapt and to help me with the bottom line. But if you're more so a seasoned professional, and I see every year you change jobs and every year you change skills, then I begin to question myself. I tend to say, what are you looking for? Are you going to want to change companies next year because you don't think this is a skill that you need to succeed in your career? So I look at the trend, so it's really case on a case by case basis. But for the audience that we have today, I don't think that having things on your resume like you are a waiter or you deliver would even affect you, as long as you complement that with other things that talk about the specific skills that you want to build, and you know how to align those two things. So if you want to go into marketing, you work in the hospitality industry. What are the things that you've learned from their customer service, all those things? Maybe you were working for a restaurant. Did you try to see if you can help them with your social media? Did you try to help them with your marketing strategy, or how they can improve sales by X, Y, and Z using some of the things you learned in school? So I really want to see the details of what you did, regardless of your job title. What are the things that you can bring to the table? Are you someone that can think outside of the box, regardless of the circumstance? So I generally, when I do interview early entry level candidates, I don't really pinpoint on, hey, have you had this specific experience that relates to this? And also to add on that is, I understand that not everybody would have the opportunity to work for Google, or have the opportunity to work for a top company that would give them access to resources, especially when you're an engineering student, right? But of course, I would like to see what other projects have you been doing on the side. There are a lot of companies and non-for-profit organizations that need the help. Have you reached out to those people to see if you can help them with some resources or the skills that you have? So I want to see the whole package. And if that's something that you know how to align the value propositions from your experiences, then I think that for me makes an entry-level candidate a little bit like differentiates himself a little bit more. Sabrina, what do you have to add to that?
I agree pretty much with everything you said. So first off, if you have a lot of hands-on, let's use waiter, because that's a common, or bartender, common position that a lot of students have. First off, if I'm reading your resume, that type of experience actually impresses me. So that's me. So I think my point I'm trying to make is, don't cut yourself short because you don't actually know who's going to be reading your resume. I'm always impressed by customer service positions, and I waited tables as well in college. So indirectly, because I'm reading your resume, we've already made a semi-connection because I can relate to the position you're in, because that's exactly where I started. So humble beginnings are usually hard work, and work is never anything to shun yourself at. Being a waiter or a bartender is a tough job. You're dealing, especially if you're in a higher end restaurant, you're dealing with a lot of high maintenance customers. Let's be frank. Obviously can't say that on your resume, but you can kind of say it in a salesmanship way. So if you're going to be, I'm a project manager, so my day is managing my clients and their expectations. So if you want to move into project management, or if you're going to go into marketing and you're going to be working with accounts and your clients, then you should be highlighting as a waiter how you did that. So for example, worked at this restaurant for 2 years. I worked with 40 different nationalities, a diverse client base. I had to manage multiple dietary, multiple customer complaints, demands, maintenance, this. Worked my way from hostess to head waiter in this period of time, so it shows progression. So I think this question was about a jack of all trades, right? Yeah. So as a new grad, 5 years into your career, if I show, 5 different positions, that could actually go against you. But as a new grad, and someone who's been in school for 4 or 5 years and now is entering the workforce or trying to get an internship, jack of all trades, you probably don't have a great deal of experience. So if you have 3 roles through high school and that, then we'll put all 3 roles on it. Cater your accomplishments and your credentials to the industry and company. For example, so if you were going through a company and they have the website, before you send your resume, you should be thoroughly researching the company. So most companies have a vision statement, a mission statement, and core values. So I work for Fluor Corporation, which is a big energy chemical mining. So we work engineering construction. So our core values are safety, number one, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. So those are 4 key words. And if you're trying to get a job at Fluor and I'm reading your resume, try to highlight those 4 things. Talk about how you worked in a team. Talk about how you value safety. Are you first aid trained? Were you a lifeguard? Did you volunteer for the Coast Guard? Do you admire the Coast Guard? Be creative. Think about how you can, because that ATS software that I keep talking about, the applicant tracking system, a big way to pass it is keywords. So how it works is, so say the employer is looking for innovation, driven, teamwork. Every time that word appears on your resume, it gets a point and it scores you. And once you get a certain score, it goes into a pile and an HR representative reads it. So, obviously don't white out words in your resume, because the systems are actually smart enough to track that and toss you, and you cheated, so you're gone. Because even if you get through the ATS software, if I read your resume and I know right away that you cheated and it'll get tossed. So don't do that. Be honest always. But that's how it kind of works. So jack of all trades as a new grad would never go against you, at least if I'm reading your resume. 5-10 years into your career, it's not as strong. I'm a generalist now in my career. As a project manager, I have to be a jack of all trades, but I didn't start out that way. I started as an engineer. I gained that credibility. I developed those skills, and I used and evolved into something bigger, like corporate business development, project management, which is definitely something that has a variety of skill sets. But I wouldn't get a lot of respect from my lead engineers if I wasn't someone who didn't do the hard work at the beginning. And so you always kind of got to think there is no necessarily quick way up the corporate ladder. If you miss that credibility bubble right early in your career, it will come to bite you in the ass later in your career, because you won't actually have the proper credentials to do the position that you're in. And there are exceptions. There are people who are just ridiculously talented and smart that can kind of skip some of those steps, but the absolute majority of the people need to actually build that credibility to gain the respect of their colleagues and clients.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. So thank you, Jessica, for the question. If you have any other question, please feel free to add it to the chat section. We want to make this as interactive as possible. But just to move forward with this conversation, we'll try to speed things up. We have a lot to cover. It would be the whole new wave of interviewing. The new normal is no longer the way we are familiar with it, which means, go to your career fair and talk to this recruiter, go and schedule an interview, go to the office or do X, Y, and Z. And all of that is more so 90% very in-person heavy. We are going into the new normal, which is going to be this virtual interviewing. And the misconception that I see with people is they think that after the whole COVID, and when they're thinking about COVID, they're thinking about the next 2-3 months, right? And they're not looking at long-term, the impact that is going to have in the economy, or with, how people are going to build wars around trying to mitigate, the infection to resurface in the future. Is companies, and when I talk to a lot of companies, they're already building structures and thinking about ways to adopt, virtual interview as a norm for them. You're not looking back and saying, oh, I'm waiting to ride this wave of, and I'm just trying to make sure that I can get interns in. And the next summer, I'm going to go back to the new normal, or the old normal, which is, try to have everybody in place. And talking to some companies in the Chicagoland area, they are thinking about a hybrid model where, they're even thinking about how can they have an internship 50% virtual and 50% in the office, if that's possible. So we are going to see companies innovate, like bringing innovative solutions to internship and to entry-level jobs. And you're going to see remote work be much more prevalent in the next coming years in the society and the economy. So how can the students start preparing for, this new normal, right? That's the questions I ask myself. I have some answers to that based on my interactions and my conversations with leading companies. But Sabrina, how do you think the new normal would affect students, and how should a student prepare for that new normal?
I guess first off, I'm really happy with the new normal and the sense of virtual. I live in a major city that is super congested and it takes an hour to get to work, even though I'm only 10 kilometers from downtown. So I'm all about remote working and getting the older generations on board with this. So I love the fact that new grads are a little bit more accustomed with this, but virtual interviews, I think it's going to stay because it just makes a lot more sense and it saves a heck of a lot more time. And you can truly get to know someone through video. I've been doing it nonstop for the last month and I can't believe how easy it's become. So once it gets a little bit more comfortable with people who aren't terribly comfortable, maybe the second, it's going to be the norm. So the biggest things you need to know is there's going to be an interview before you get an interview. And I think this kind of always exists. And what I mean by that is that you need to be careful about your social media footprint. So I absolutely Google people's names. So that 100%, I do it if I'm interviewing a candidate, but I also do it when I'm going to a client meeting to pitch a proposal. If I know the attendees list ahead of time, which 95% of the time I do, because I always request it, is I Google every single person's name. If I have phone numbers, I program them into my phone. I go see if they have a profile picture in WhatsApp. I'm a stalker. I go to their Facebook page, their LinkedIn page, their Instagram account. I'm not on Snapchat, but anything I can find on a Google search is I do. And if I find things that I don't particularly admire, you're never gonna get an interview and you're never gonna be told that. So I'm telling you now, make sure your footprint's clean. And okay, I don't care if you party during college. I did the same thing, but I was slightly old enough that not everyone had a camera on their cell phone. So just be mindful of what you're posting, what you're bragging about on social media. And if you are doing those things, damn well make sure you have a private account. And never, ever, ever put that stuff in LinkedIn under any circumstance. But I think social media is a great way to kind of give the little bread trail that you want an employer to see. So, if you do have a private account, share a few things publicly that make you look good. Like if you got a prestigious award, scholarship, or if you're an athlete, finishing a marathon, doing some like any type of personal stuff, make sure those photos are public. So an employer that does a Google search for your Facebook page or Instagram page can find that. And then the other stuff is private. That's maybe a little trick. Obviously, if you do have any public accounts like your WhatsApp and you allow anyone to see your profile picture, make sure that's also a professional photo and not inappropriate. Little things like would just say to do that. And then, so if you do get an interview and you pass that test, obviously make sure you got a solid internet connection, you have a well-lit room and a good mic. So, your words aren't broken up, and that you look good, obviously, and you test the software maybe ahead of time, especially if it's your first couple ones and you're not terribly familiar. But I imagine new grads, with Zoom, Skype, I'd almost think that the virtual interview is going to be harder for the, people who aren't used to it. I would say the younger generation is super used to talking through their video chats and texts and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, students ask me this question all the time. Hey, Manuel, I have never done a virtual interview before, and how do I break the ice? It's easier to break the ice when you're in person, or I would hope. But when you are, meeting someone, assumably that, would make the decision over your life, almost, how do you start, creating rapport with that individual? And if we don't have any questions, I'll move forward with this topic. Is one of the things I always think of, like, you need to have a pitch, right? As a salesman, as a good salesman, you need to have a sales pitch. And I don't think that a sales pitch is only necessary when you are in front of that individual. There are several, touch points that a student should think about when they are trying to formulate their sales pitch and really effectively use it. I think of myself as like like an extreme networker, right? When I meet someone, I always look at what are the ways that I can showcase my value to them and not come off very pushy. Like, and if I see anyone trying to do the same to me, then it turns me off a lot. So one of the things that we've been building at UpKey is how can we build a technology to really help students differentiate themselves. And Kurt was talking about the video newsletter you see with Gary Vee, you see with Grant Cardone, and all the folks that he mentioned is, people want to interact with humans, right? I don't want to rub it. I don't want to work with someone that I don't know their personality. And in this virtual environment, it's a little bit different to judge. My mother says that there are two people that always go to an interview. The first person is the representative, and then the next person is the person in question. So the representative is almost that person that puts a facade. And as a recruiter, sometimes when I interview people, I know that they're putting their best foot forward. So I try to make them, comfortable enough to show me their real selves. And one of the things that we have found out that is working is when an interviewer has an interaction or somewhat of an interaction with a candidate prior to that interview and after the interview, so pre and post, then you tend to differentiate yourself. And the best way to do that is not just by connecting on LinkedIn. Of course, that's great. Engaging with your post is great. It shows some human element to the individual. It showcases their interest, it showcases their thought process. That is always nice, but how can I picture you working in a team? And video is the way to go for me. When I look at video, I look at an opportunity that students can use and utilize to really stand out from the pack. And sending a virtual elevator pitch or a video pitch to someone before you even go to them, or even more importantly, after that networking or after that interview, would definitely differentiate you, in my opinion, because not a lot of students will take the time to customize a video pitch and tell Emmanuel, Sabrina how well they were or how they felt during the interview and how motivated they are, or X, Y, and Z. And making Sabrina or Emmanuel think that I really want to work for you. I know I have competition, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tell you that I will go above and beyond to get the job done. And this is my personality. So we've aligned a couple of things. And of course, if you're part of Morgan University, you can definitely use those services for free. But Sabrina, what are your thoughts around, elevator pitch, number one, and number two, virtual, virtual pitches, pre and post interviews?
Okay, so elevator pitches change depending on your audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give an example from my career, and two examples, the elevator pitch specifically, and then I'll talk about how to really research your audience ahead of time so you can really target that pitch. So when I was at a company function, so it was an after work party, I was brand new to my Canadian corporate headquarters, and I had targeted a high potential business development rotational position that only super high potentials get. And the reason for that is because if you go into corporate business development, you have access to stock prices, confidential information. So they're really, really, really hard to get into, and they're never hired externally. You kind of have to work your way into internally those types of positions. So that was the position I wanted. And the reason I wanted it, because if I got in, my access to my network would tenfold. So how do you get in? First thing you do is you find out who makes the decisions and who you need to impress and influence to even be considered. So that was my first step. Then I was like, damn it, these are all VPs, how that? And I'm an engineer on a project under like a zillion different people up the corporate chain to get them. So how do I get it? So you find out in your network who knows them. So this is how you connect your circles. So networks are like a spider web. They span out. The more connectors and links, the more wound, the bigger it goes. And that's how you get a network, and that's how you connect to these bigwigs. So I ended up getting a great introduction from a peer of mine who was about 3-4 years ahead of me, but this peer actually did that role. So she did a wonderful introduction for me, explaining that I did a stint overseas in Mongolia. So something that's really differentiating, really unique, that most, especially men, really impresses the older generation of men, because I'm a female and I went to a third world country as an engineer. And so immediately that's a conversation. I know this ahead of time. I know, I've tested it. That is my elevator speech. That is my differentiator. That one variable that everyone's like, what? You went to Mongolia? Like, it's instantly. So I've tested it. She slipped that into the introduction. I spent an hour talking to this fella about my experience. In that time, I found out we had 3 mutual friends. I made a connection. That's kind of knowing it. So how do you learn this information ahead of time? I think the biggest thing is, again, I've kind of talked about doing Google searches and stuff like that, but also use your network. Your network and your reputation are probably going to be single-handedly the two biggest and most important variables in your career over the course of your career. And obviously, as a new grad, they're probably semi at zero. So your networks, your other classmates, your professors, and then who you go out and meet and through virtual job fairs. So today, I think in 3 hours from now, there's a LinkedIn job fair, virtual job fair, for example. So get on LinkedIn and find out these events. And you can go and attend. You can just sit there and listen to presentations, or you can actually go to individual tables. So they're just like an actual job fair, but they're done virtually now. So that's all over the place. So when I was so that connection with that interview got me put forward. So once I got put forward for this as a potential candidate, how did I get the job? And I got the job, and I had to go through 8 interviews with people on the corporate sales board. So how do you find out about the people on the corporate sales board? As soon as people found out a lot of people came to me and gave me information, but there was one person that was interviewing me on the corporate sales board that no one knew. He's completely he was a third party person. I had no idea who he was. And so I went to Google, and it took me about an hour of Google search until I could really find out who this guy was. And I found out he was an actor in his spare time that liked Shakespeare. And guess what? I'm a big Shakespeare as a writer. I'm a huge Shakespeare fan. And so, yeah, damn well in my interview, about 10 minutes into talking about my credentials, I slipped in how I like Shakespeare. And that kind of took the conversation. He took over the conversation. We got talking. He ended up mentioning that he's a huge hockey fan. Yeah, damn well, I played hockey for 20 years. I was a junior Olympian. So damn, that's boom, we're in. Interview went 2.5 hours. So that is how you get jobs. Your credentials get you an interview, but what gets you a job offer is making that connection, being authentic. Because a lot of people like, Sabrina, you weren't authentic. You manipulated that whole situation. I didn't. That hockey thing was that was a bonus. I went in being who I am. I didn't pretend to like Shakespeare. I honestly do. Anybody who's getting interviewed by me who mentions that they're a Harry Potter fan, well, I wrote a blog in college on Harry Potter that had 30,000 readers, and damn well I'm going to mention that in my interview because I'm a gigantic, huge J.K. Rowling fan. So that's kind of how you do it. Like, this is thinking outside the box and being creative. Because you can carry a conversation with me that we could have at a coffee shop, or, at a networking work function. I know that you can do that with our clients, that you can be smooth, authentic, charismatic, and, anyone can come into an interview, answer 3 sentences and do it, be a robot. A bot could do that. What I want in a candidate is something that they special and something that they can actually put on their resume. Your resume, you have to brag, don't be humble, talk about your accomplishments, talk about how great you are, essentially. And then in your interview, that's where your humbleness, your authenticity, and your personality comes to life. And if you do your research ahead of time and understand who's interviewing you, if any little feedback, like for me, example, I'm all over social media. So I am an easy person to research. The older generation is not so much. You might have to be a little bit more creative there, or just that's where the rehearsed elevator speeches come in. Under a minute, you think? Elevator speech, what do you think? A minute, 2 minutes? I would say anything over 2 minutes.
I prefer it short and sweet.
Yeah, so basically who you are, something that's really big a big accomplishment that's in line with the person you're speaking to. So if it's an interview in marketing, did you bring a big client into your previous internship? Do you run a website of your own personal brand? Something that kind of like makes you special is probably the second thing you say. And then the third thing is kind of wrapping it up. Under a minute. And you want to leave a little cookie crumb in there, so there's a follow-up question. That's the biggest thing you want to do, is that the person you're talking to wants to learn more. So that's why it's called the hook. You're reeling them in. So that question goes, and you want these follow-up questions, right? So an elevator speech shouldn't be closed. Just think of like an open-ended question. If you want to learn more about someone, don't give them a yes or no answer. Kind of give them an open-ended question where they actually have to give a response, and therefore you can do a follow-up. An elevator speech hook is the same, pitch is the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we've been discussing internally because of our focus on diversity and inclusion or equity is, some students don't really, there are two types of network, right? There's a network you're born into, and there's a network that you create for yourself. And for a lot of students, especially the ones from low income communities or the ones that don't really have a lot of social capital, they don't always come from the network. They're not always born into the network that they can leverage at scale. And it could just not it's not only about who my parent or my dad play golfs with, but it's what can my parent teach me in terms of building my own network. So a lot of students that we work with fall under that category. And one of the things that we teach them is the fact that you're born in a network doesn't mean that that's the limitation of your network, right? I went into LinkedIn day one. I had 0 followers. Today I have over 10,000 followers. Right. I didn't know any of those individuals when I started LinkedIn. It's all about, number one, I started with the people that I knew, connected with them from school, X, Y, and Z. But as you put more content out, as your interest develops, and as you start finding your own voice, you start being attracted to the people that have similar interests. And if you're someone that's passionate about engineering or someone's passionate about X, Y, and Z, you realize that the more you put out intentionally, you're going to attract people that share similar interests, and then that is going to be something that you can use to your own advantage. So I always encourage students, you don't have to think about, oh, I've never put a post on LinkedIn before. What should I do? Is it going to even be worthwhile? How did I start? Just put a post, start with a post. I haven't connected with someone before. Are they going to accept my connection? How would you know? Try connecting with them. Add a note. If you can add a pitch, but at the very least, add a note and connect with them. Start talking about, what you liked about their post, what you liked about the article, engage with them, be human, right? I don't want to work with a bot. I want to ensure that if it's someone I want to recommend or someone I want to mentor, they have a personality that I'm attracted to. They have good energy. And that's just me, because I don't like being around people that, are just sitting and can ask a question, that can interact with me, the person. So, always think about, that network is not limited to what you were born into, but there is a lot out there. All you need to do is put some work out, stop playing video games, stop, going out and walking in the park. Of course, walk with your dogs and all of that, but make sure you set aside time for those specific objectives. If you want to get a job at Google, you don't know anyone that works at Google, and that's your dream job. Number one, I always say, don't even limit yourself to just one company, because you end up being frustrated most of the time. Expand your network, expand your scope of your horizon of thinking, and that is always going to benefit you. So we have about 2 minutes before the webinar ends. Is there any question from the audience? If you learned something, can you raise your hand?
Well, hopefully they did.
Everybody did, I think. So that's good. So if you don't have any last question, any question, we're going to conclude with Sabrina. What do you have to say to conclude the webinar?
The biggest thing I think I want, so if I was to go back to the day I graduated university, I always ask myself this question, and my whole book was essentially written based on me interviewing VPs and asking them that question. What would you want to know? I think some of the things I think you need to tell yourself, and kind of just to talk about the point you just made, is A, don't compare yourself to other people. Careers can be 40 years of your life. So if you're comparing yourself on graduation day to someone who, is top of the class, doesn't mean they're going to be successful. Just because you're good in school has no bearing on if you're going to be a good employee or not. I can assure you of that. You come from underprivileged background, that can actually be a gift in disguise for your career, because you've had to earn it a lot more than people have been given it. Poverty can make you creative. I remember I was so in debt during college, but man, I'm really good at investing my money now. I really learned the lessons along the way. That self-awareness and really embracing your failures and mistakes is critical, because you will make mistakes in your career. It is 100% guarantee. So do not let them cripple you. Focus on why you made the mistake, learn that lesson, and move forward. Yeah, everyone's like, oh, don't look in the past. I don't think you need to be crippled by your past, but I think you need to learn the lesson before you move on and continue to do that throughout your career. Your goals today will not be your goals in 10 years from now. I can nearly guarantee it. So you need to really kind of take it that the world economy right now is really kind of gray and dreary, and there's a lot of negativity in the news right now. And you can be so consumed by that right now. I think you need to understand and embrace your fears and your anxiety and never ignore them, but you need to start to create maybe a small little plan about the next 6 months of your life and how you're going to gain some of the experience and skills that are going to help you. And right now you might need to take that fully yourself, which is the point I really wanted to make, is that your career is your responsibility. Do never believe that your boss or even a mentor, these can help you, open doors for you, and they can be your allies, but they will never care more about your career than you. No one will. You yourself will always be your biggest advocate and supporter. So you yourself need to create career opportunities. When I was stuck in engineering and I wanted to move into business development, I made those network contacts to get out. My boss did not want to lose me as an engineer. They did not help me. I had to go around them. And that is what I mean by taking full responsibility of your career. So if you can do that and you can trust yourself, I think you might fall on your butt sometimes, but you will always be in control. And I think that's the biggest thing I want to talk about, is own your career and always have full control over it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Sabrina.
Welcome.
You have, I think you've impacted the students that have been here for the past hour tremendously.
Thanks. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about, because I talked so much about resumes in interview, I actually have 2 free resume preparation and an interview preparation guide. If you want a copy of those, visit my LinkedIn profile, and my website's right there, and you can go download them right off my website. So they're 10 pages each, so they're kind of like the crash course, but they talk about likely questions and how to prepare them in interviews, but they also talk about how to create differentiation on your resume, and it also provides an ATS resume template in it. So if you're not getting any interviews from your resume, you might simply just not have an ATS approved resume. So just go read those. They're 10 pages each. They'll take you under an hour to read, so and help you, I think. Sorry, that's my sales pitch for my own company.
That's actually fantastic, because I think that students would definitely benefit from that a lot. So I'm sure they're going to pass along this information to the rest of the student body. If you don't know Sabrina's LinkedIn, just go and type in Sabrina Woodworth, Kurt Marketing, and Emmanuel Ndifor, and connect with us on.
Or just go to my website, worklessons101.com. Might be easier for them to remember, Worklessons 101.
So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and we hope to see you, I think, tomorrow or day after tomorrow for the next webinar. And make sure you tell your friends to join us live and ask more questions. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Kurt. And from Emmanuel and UpKey, bye-bye.